Hi, everybody. Today we're going to learn chapter 43. And what's really interesting about chapter 43 is that it's one of the summary chapters. Chapter 33, chapter 43, and chapter 53 are all summary chapters. This is when we connect everything together from the beginning to the end. So today we're going to learn chapter 43. We're going to connect everything together from the beginning to the end. And we started to learn about after chapter 33, we really started to learn about the lower unity. Well, lower unity means how the things inside the world don't really change, don't at all change God's oneness, and how is this so? And the world, actually our world, has multiple dimensions. We live in the world of action, but there's another dimension, is the world of the audio world, the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, and that's like the wave world. And then there's another dimension, which is the meaning world, which is the Olam Abriya. And all of them are God's thought, speech, and action. The world of meaning is God's thought. The world of formation is God's speech. That's the vibrations. And the world that we live in is God's action, the world of action, the world of pictures. And last week we were learning about how something very peculiar happens with words, that the ability to connect and make form thought only comes in after a person can speak. In other words, even though speech is something lower, but it allows the higher skill, the thinking skill, to be able to function only when the speech. So because something, as things that are higher fall lower. So speech in a way falls lower, but it has a higher power, and therefore only when a child becomes 2 years old, when they start speaking, do they gain the ability to actually design, picture what they want before they actually do it. Otherwise, they're just like, before 2 years old, they're just like a camera. And all they can do is differentiate between things, but they can't actually create pictures of what they want to do. And that only comes after they can speak. And we spoke about two sayings, that the mother lends her clothes to the daughter. In other words, the mother is the ability to divide, lends her clothes, in other words, lends her the ability to divide. The 5 powers of division, which correspond to the 5 end letters that are only written at the ends of words in Lashon HaKodesh in Hebrew. He lends it to the daughter, which is the power of speech. And then there's another saying, is that the father is the foundation of the daughter, because for communication, you need to be able to connect symbols which don't connect, that represent certain ideas. That there's no inherent reason why the symbol should represent a certain idea, and the right brain, which is the father, which is the insight, is able to blur the definitions of things in order to be able to connect a symbol to a certain concrete thing, and say that that symbol and this thing are equal each other. And so in speech, we have these 2 powers. The mother lends her clothes to the daughter, which is the power of division. And then we have the power of connection, which is the father is the foundation of the daughter. And then we have this thing that the lower level actually empowers the higher level meaning to be able to function. And that's last week. And this week, let's start reading inside. And something really interesting is going to happen. We're going to see the inversion, the famous inversion. And meaning to say that before Tzimtzum, before the first contraction, the order is opposite. First comes action, then comes speech, then comes meaning. In other words, before Tzimtzum, in the like the essence of God, the first thing he sees is the end picture, our picture. Then comes the speech, in other words, the waves, the vibrations, and then comes the meanings, the deep meaning in this world, in these pictures. That's before Tzimtzum. After Tzimtzum, it goes other way around, thought, speech, and action, which is the normal way of doing things. And what is fascinating, absolutely fascinating, is that the way where our eyes move around, they're sort of like a stick shift engine. Like when you move the stick shift in a car, that connects to certain gears. So when our eyes move around as we're talking, we're accessing different parts of the brain. And we spoke about this before. There's something even more fascinating. What is fascinating is that when you look up, we connect to pictures. And as we've been saying before, that is actually Maisa. That's action. That's the world of action is a very visual world. So when people look up, they are actually attaching to the picture part of the brain. And when their eyes go back and forth, left and right, is their audio brain. And when people look down, they go into meaning. The meaning is either emotions or the meaning is mathematics. So that's what happens when people look down. That's what happens. That's what they're accessing. But that's the highest level. Isn't feelings and meaning the highest level? Isn't that the highest level? Yeah, but the way our setup is, we're sort of set up like before Tzimtzum. That the first thing that happens before Tzimtzum is the vision of the end state, which is what we do as humans. We look up. The next thing that happens in Tzimtzum is the waves, the vibrations that will be necessary to create that end state of those pictures. And then once we've had that, then God establishes the meaning of those pictures, the meaning behind that, and that's we looking down. And after Tzimtzum, it's actually the opposite. First is thought, then is speech, and then is action. And then this idea of thought and speech and action repeats itself again and again. First, it's in a general way, and then it becomes more specific. God goes through this process of thought, speech, and action again in a more specific way, and thought, speech, and action in a more specific way, till we actually have the actual thought, speech, and action of God, which is after the Malchus of Atzilus, and that is where the lower unity really is. That's the actual. When we refer to the lower unity, that's what we're speaking about. We're speaking about below Atzilus, God's cognitive thought, speech, and action. But thought, speech, and action exists on higher levels as well. So let's read this inside because it's absolutely fascinating. And of course, how does it connect with the mitzvah of the God's oneness is that we then connect up, we follow the paths, and we connect up God's thought, speech, and oneness back to the original source. Okay, are we able to? I hope we're able. Are we able to see the text online? Hope so.
It's online right now. Are you seeing the?
Yes, I see it. I see it. I hope the other people can see it.
Yeah, I think they can.
Okay, now it's really going to be fascinating. Now follow along. Mikol Hanal Yuvan, from everything that we've learned in the previous 42 chapters, we can understand Gamkein Hanimshal Lamaskal Lamayla. We can understand the story, what's happening for a person that actually thinks into what's going on in the spiritual dimensions. When we think about the details, the parts of the chain order of creation from above till below, And we have this mission to connect them to the holistic oneness, which is the original source. This is when God had a simple thought, but Atzmus or Ein Sof, in the essence of his infinite light, before the first contraction, before contraction, there are three levels, not the same levels of Yachid, Echad, and Kadmain. These are functional levels. Yachid, Echad, and Kadmain is what we spoke about in chapter 10. This is not Yachid, Echad, and Kadmain. This is Machshava Dibur Ma'aser. There exists a behavior of thought, speech, and action before Tzimtzum. Shemachshava now, it's all still thought, but there's thought, speech, and action in thought. Thought, speech, and action in thought. And now that we've spoken about before, the first thing is action. Shiva Atzmus Mamish. In Atzmus Mamish. When have we spoken about Atzmus? In this whole Sefer. We only mention Atzmus in like chapter 10, actually, if I remember correctly. So now we're really connecting to the original source. We're speaking about a essential thought in the essence of God. The thought is a thought of action. This is the idea of the end state is what God thought about in his essence first. And this end state, which he thought about in his essence, is not what the Rambam, the Loi Koloshon Rambam, not what the Rambam was speaking about. The Rambam says that by God, by knowing himself, knows everything. That's a lower state, what the Rambam is speaking about. Now, at this point in time in Atzmus, he's looking at everything that's going to happen in the chain order of Abiyah, the four worlds. As if it's a understanding of something outside of him, like he's making like a movie. It's the actual picture frames in the thought. He's thinking about something nivdal that's theoretically separate from him. Even though that's impossible, there's nothing outside of him. But he's sort of picturing something as if it will be separate. And that's not the Rambam speaking about God knows himself, he knows everything that's going on. No, that's not the first level. The first level is looking at it as if it's something totally separate from him. The second state. So we have to say that there's levels before Tzimtzum, and there's behaviors, and this is the first behavior. The second behavior that in Atzmus, Shava Atzmus, who combine Masha Shir Ba'atzmei B'Kayach, Masha Asav Liyesh B'Shtalshus. This we actually spoke about in chapter Yud, and that is that he pictures in himself everything that's going to be in the Ishtalshus. And that was associated with Kadmain, actually. We said Yachid, Echad, and Kadmain. Oneness, Echad, how we, how all the 10 spheres in potential is Echad, and Kadmain is how he figures everything out before he does it. That's Kadmain. So he over here as a behavior, this is considered Dibur Sheva Machshava. Giselle Galif B'Tihur. And this is what it says in the beginning of the Zayar, that God made hieroglyphics in the upper purity. In other words, Chakichas Ha'oisius of Atzmus, scraping out, engraving the letters in his essence. So v'chein mashakasim kihu amar b'bechinas b'machshava atzmitz v'yehi. He spoke in his essential thought. We're speaking about speaking in thought. And that's what happens after Ishtarshalos. After Tzimtzum, I mean. Wouldn't he speak and would he not speak and do it? Speak where? Speak in his thoughts before Tzimtzum. Alidei Tzimtzum Arishin, how does he get it done? Through the Tzimtzum. Through the Tzimtzum he gets it done. So he speaks in his essential thought, and then he gets it done through Tzimtzum. But Kahai governance and similarly, he called Amira when God says Omar, we're speaking about the speech inside thought. And this speech is an internal speaking to himself. This is higher than speech to others. Speech to others is move your ear and hear. And he paid attention and he listened. No, that's not what we're speaking about. That's not what we're speaking about. We're speaking about God speaking to himself. In other words, measuring the vibrations necessary for the entire creation. The third level, third behavior that God has before the creation, third behavior is thought of thought, ha'atzmi of the essence, like we explained above, when we're thinking about the concept, in different types of using different types of letters, we're trying to capture an idea, capture a concept, capture a feeling, capture meaning. That's the third behavior. What's the third behavior? When God thinks about Ana Emlech, I'm going to be a king. That's a meaning. That's something meaningful. The Kahai Gavna, but Apapi, and this is according to his insight and will of his essence. In other words, his insight and the will of his essence, he's able to establish the meaning. But if he didn't create the picture and the waves, there's nothing to attach meaning to. So first he has to create the picture and the waves, the audio, and then he attaches the meaning, the third step. It's so interesting. And that's what he says, V'haya Olam, and the world happened. Baruch Shamar, V'haya Olam, and the world happened. But Bechinas Malchus de Ein Sof Ana Emlech, basically the expression of the infinite happens, and I become a king. What the meaningful thing that was intended to happen actually happens. The world happens. In other words, the meaning gets transferred into the world. In other words, before Tzimtzum, it goes action, speech, meaning, and through the Tzimtzum, the meaning goes through first. So we already have a potential picture, so we don't need that. Then the meaning goes through first, and the meaning becomes the first level after Tzimtzum. Ana Emlech, I will be a king. But according to this, this that we say that the Hashem's desire to do good, the original desire to do good, was awakened through the future behaviors of man, the lower behaviors. I need to be able to see further down on the page. Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. Again, that because of what God foresaw in the kindness of that people will do, that's what aroused his thoughts and his will, his meaning. And Harihu Magia l'tchilas Yisrael Saratzim b'chinas Atmos. So the future desire to do kindness awakens the essence of God before Tzimtzum. And we can see this in verses. This is what's written. His wonders and his thoughts upon us. Which thoughts? The thoughts of meaning. Atzmu mispar. They are awesome in number. Awesome in number. So these thoughts of meaning are now transcribed into after Tzimtzum to be the first level. To his application, there is no number, because when we do application in our left brain is digital and there's numbers, but God, that's beyond numbers. His tunase, his application is beyond number. In other words, there's infinite layers of meaning. According to the person's insight and focus, that's how deep you can go into the thought of the essence. But it says in the essence of God's light. These are all things that we say in our prayers. How deep are your thoughts? Meaning to say, there's always a layer after layer after layer of meaning till no end, infinite. There's always a deeper meaning, and it's never boring. And on this is written, no, so too, when it's understood, when these three levels go down the levels of the chain order of creation, with the light of the will, and the thoughts, that thought of God in his simple oneness, when it comes down after the first Tzimtzum, which is called an empty space or a perceived empty space. So basically, God creates a perceived empty space in order for the creation to be perceivable. When the light of the kav is the ruler. That's the first level after Tzimtzum, is the ruler. That is when God sees everything. Can we turn the page? When a God has foresight and carefully looks on everything, that is the beginning of the kav. That's the beginning of after Tzimtzum. Biskir achas, he does it with one glance. So after Tzimtzum, that's when God looks over all of history with a glance. So after Tzimtzum, there's going to be three levels of Machshava Divrei Raisa. This time they're going to be in order, not opposite order. They're going to be in order. Shenikra Biyah, which God's thought, speech, and action is called Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, the worlds of Biyah. Now establishing a rule. God's thought is Bibria, the world parallel universe of Bria. But Dibur and God's speech Yetzira is in the world of Yetzira, because audio is actually vibration, and that the world of Yetzira is formation, how these vibrations form. Well, Maisa and action is in the world of action. God's action is expressed in the world that we live in. Like it's actually written, God created what? He created meaning. He's created his thoughts. He formed the audio vibrations that are going to be the skeleton behind the world. Asitziv, then he gets it done. You do it like it's known. And it goes down from Kav to be a hidden want to create the character of the original man, Adam Kadmon, Adam, the original Adam, Batigemin, and then the Attic days, the old days where what do we want to achieve with this character? It's like sort of feelings. Like when people create a character and Lahabdil, they create a writer writes a movie script. So the whole point of the movie, why are people paying the money to be able to go and see the film? That's because they want to experience those emotions through this character. So the first thing, and that's what the reason why people do that is because that's the way we're created by God. Because so when God creates the character, the next thing is what are these amazing emotions and experiences which God wants to bring out? Barachampin and the big faces, what type of dream storyline and things like dream, that means long faces, will capture these emotions. Shabalamata, like in all the scripts which people are interested in, there's a mentor and there's a great chase, and there's like a mentor, and the character goes through a transformation, goes into another world where he has a test, and then he recalls, he connects to the mentor, and there's a relationship between the mentor and the character and the main character, and then there's a bunch of things that happen in the story, and there's a great chase which creates certain emotions, and then the character becomes transformed, and then he finishes off the movie with the end state. So that's out the game, but all the plot is Arachampin, is the if you could have anything, what will it be? That's the plot, Arachampin, the long faces. So all these stages come down through a chain order of events where one triggers the other b'derech prat in all details and parts. The mashal ba'adam lamata, like the metaphor of a lowly man, that in a man's personal story, the light of the essence of his original essential thought, which is hidden in the essence of the soul, the galoi, it is hidden. The galoi, that fires him up to have an actual revealed rotten, a want, and intellect and emotions, etc. Ad bechinas machshava shemislabeshes the midas halev. That same thought eventually triggers emotions in the heart and the respiratory system, which is actual the hormones. And those thoughts, which are in the emotions but haven't yet triggered cognitive, haven't triggered yet conscious thoughts, that is called, the conscious thought is called Leah already, because Leah, the wife of Yaakov, captures that idea in God, greater than life, larger than life, as we have mentioned before, larger than life. Leah captures the idea of God thinking, having cognitive thought. But when cognitive thought happens, it happens in conscious thought happens. Sorry, conscious thought. Shekol Megillah Madrega said 3 parts: Machshava, Dibur, Ma'aseh, meaning, the vibration, and the actual things, the actual action. Canal, like we mentioned above. So Vilamaila, and what is this? Now we've explained this process of man. What is this in the spiritual world? So I know basically God has thoughts which actually capture the and hold the emotions of the world of Atzilus, which is the world where God presents Himself as a organized personality that we can relate to. Shenikra Zah. Zah is the small faces, which means an organized, practical personality, which is very balanced and which we can look up to and aspire to be vessels to. That's what Zah is. That's where aspiring through our behaviors, our thought, speech, and action, we aspire to become vessels and to be the vehicle of Zah, that Zah should express itself in our bodies. Shal Zeh Amar, and there is a verse that captures this, and that says, Vayem Hashem Elibay, God spoke to his heart. Amir Zuba Machshava, he didn't speak in a audible voice. This is in his thoughts. He was making a decision, because if he actually spoke in an audible way, it would have happened already. He's making a decision, and God speaking in his thoughts. And sometimes God thinks about doing something and it creates repercussions in this world, but it doesn't actually happen. It just remains as a thought, the Zah of the small faces, Shenikra Adam Ha'elyon, because the small faces is also called Adam Ha'elyon, the higher man, because as we just said, that our behavior captures the higher man inside us. In other words, we become a vehicle for the higher man depending on how we behave. When we take the challenge and go through challenges in order to become a vehicle of the higher man, which is Zah, then we fulfill the mission of our life. And sometimes it's only thoughts in the higher man which happen, and Hashem changed his mind. Where did he change his mind? Because he didn't have an audible speech yet. Audible speech is after the expression of Atzilus. It's inside Atzilus. It hasn't become audible speech yet. This, when God changes his mind, that's in his thought, that didn't actually come to actual dibur words. Well, an action, at all. It's that the heart to the mouth did not reveal itself. Because if the heart revealed itself to the mouth, it would already happen. Tzaddik, can we pull up the text? God does not say who is going to be righteous and who's going to be wicked. He thinks. Because if he would already say, then the person already would be forced to be righteous and forced to be wicked. So instead, God thinks about how they should be righteous, and that inspires them to be righteous, but the person still has their own divine free choice to be like they feel they want to be. Derech Klalos, and we look in the holistic picture. In other words, we're looking beyond Atzilus. We're looking at the whole Seder Shtashlos. That's what Derech Klalos, through. In English, it's the word through. Through is Derech. On Yiddish, durch, yeah, to go through. Klalos Hakol, when we're looking at the holistic picture of everything, because Gimel Madregas, we're looking at three levels: the Machshava Divrei Maaseh, thought, speech, and action. After Seder Shtashlos, Adam Kadmon, so the first character, the first original man, the Machshava Bechinas Adam the Bria, is the man of Bria. That's God's first creation. Not an actual creation, it's a creation of ideas. That's why Bria is associated with Adam Kadmon. Meaning, in other words, meaning is associated with Adam Kadmon. The two stages of Atik Yemin, the emotions, and the long faces, the dream faces, which are going to be vehicles to capture the emotions. That is Adam Debriya, the man of Yetzirah. That means formation. That means speech, God's speech, but it's not audible speech. It's still internal speech, deep internal speech. That's the vibrations, the dreams and the vessels. That's God's vibrations. B'chinazah, and the small faces of Atzilus, Nikra Adam Dasiya. It's called the man of action. So the world of Atzilus, when we're looking at the bigger picture, the world of Atzilus is considered the man of action, even though no action has been taken. Why is it called the man of action? Because a balanced personality that will present itself to man is established in Adam Dasiya Zoh. Derech Prat, Gam V'chinazah Kol L'Gimel Madrigas, and then Zoh itself, go into the parts of things, we go more specific, lower down in Seder Shalshus. So Zoh also has 3 levels, Machshava Dibra Ma'aseh, Biyah, Briya Yetzirah Asiyah, which is the same as God's thought, speech, and action. Nitza Mumam Lamaska B'chos. Now, an intellectual person that looking at the holistic picture, which is important to do sometimes, in order to connect up the dots to the main idea, when we connect the many, very many parts, the chinas might set the machshava from the action of thought, ha'atzmi, which that was the first level, first behavior in the essence, the atmosphere in the essence of the unlimited infinite light, until the action in the thought of Zod Atzilus, because Zod Atzilus is considered a man of action when we're looking at the bigger picture. And all of this, this is the meaning of the verse which you keep on repeating when we're learning the Sefer, whatever God wanted in his essential light, thought, Asa, he did, Ein Atzilus Lebria, Ma'ain Atzilus Lebria. Basically, he from the intangible Atzilus, he made the concrete Bria, which is his actual, audible, meaningful thought. Now, we've been learning this in order to help us to fulfill the mitzvah of God's oneness, and we actually say Shema every morning and night. So we need to, now let's connect this meaning to the actual words that we actually say in the prayer, that when we say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, Echad. Echad, it finishes with the Daled, and it's written in a large. It's written large. Here's a mezuzah. Dar Echad, the Dalet is big. Okay? Why is it big? Because whenever we have big letters written in the Sefer Torah, it's because we're speaking about the way the letters are at a higher level in thought. And really, it's the expression of God's application, which is the external level of the mother. So we have to understand that what God is doing before Tzimtzum, or even after Tzimtzum, is dynamic. There are many components at play. There's the fact that God is doing a certain action, he's having a thought, but what of the spheres is interfacing with this action, and this is the Malchus the Tfuna, the expression of Tfuna, which is the and the Tfuna itself is an application of the left brain. The power to apply from the left brain is like the end of the mother, which is the cognitive comprehension. Because cognitive comprehension is objective, whereas Tfuna application is subjective. So the lowest level of objective thought, which is like the mother, the end of the mother, that becomes that actually feeds into subjective thought, which is applicative thought, and which is the expression of Tfuna, and that interfaces, that's like the big Dalet, and then that becomes actual cognitive thought. Bunyan Kesher Shel Tefillin Shel Rosh. The knot on the back of a Tefillin Shel Rosh, when we put on tefillin, let's just, I have it right over here, just make it clear what we're talking about. Okay, so here, this knot, the Tefillin Shel Rosh, this is in the shape of a Dalet. This is in the shape of Dalet. That represents the interface. That's Malchus, the expression of Tfuna, of God's comprehension, doing the behavior of thought, of meaning, which will then become the meaning for our world. It's the same as the big Dalet of Echad. So that's very interesting. The big Dalet, it's right over here. Can't miss it. Well, the big Dalet, that's the big Dalet. It's the same as this Dalet. But what's interesting, Dalet, 1 second, how do we make this look like it up? Yeah, there. That's the Dalet. Now, what's interesting is that this Dalet is actually part of the Shin. Shin, Dalet, and this is the Yud. The Yud. This is the Yud. The Yud of the hand tefillin, right? Shin, Dalet, Yud, that's God's name. That's God's name. Shin is 3. Dalet and Yud is 1/4. Pi. Because pi, the numbers of pi r squared go on forever, and God, and in Hebrew it means die. It's enough. It's enough. You don't need to keep on going on forever. That's enough. And that's the power of God, which God says, okay, we're creating this world and it's enough. It doesn't need to keep on growing forever and ever. It just needs to be way so big, and that all the meanings can be captured. But it's interesting that the Dalet in the back of tefillin is actually associated with the big Dalet in Shema. So let's go of Echad, of God's oneness, and let's go back into the text. So I think it's something new which you haven't thought about before, that actually what's happening, it's not static, it's dynamic. There is a dynamic play of a number of components that are all happening together to make our world. So it's not like a just chain order of events and 1, 2, 3, 4. There are different parts of the chain moving together in a dynamic way in order to create our world in a specific order. Very. So it turns out a maskil, when a person thinks about the entire order of creation, that's the maskil. But bechlalos means he's looking at the holistic picture of the entire creation. Mikama ribui prate, when he looks at many parts, machshava, the machshava, starting from the action of the God's thought, ha'atzmi in the essence. So we're starting with the lowest level first, right? The end state is in the mind first, but in the essence of the infinite light, till action in God's thoughts, the Zah, the Atzilus of the Zah, the small faces of Atzilus, in other words, the action that God plans to take. And this is what it means. Anything that God desired in his essential thought, Asa, he actually implements. Asa, he does, he implements Ma'ayin, the Atzilus, the Bria, from the abstract of Atzilus to Bria, to cognitive thought. Bria is already cognitive thought. So when people think, they think on multiple levels. Any thought that we have, any cognitive thought that happens, is actually, there's a chain order of thoughts that are happening behind and behind and behind and behind. So the same way, like this, we understand. Oh, actually, we went up a few lines, but that doesn't matter. So we understand the big dalet from the word echad. In Hero Yifra, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Which is the expression of the application aspect of the left brain, which is the lower level of the objective mother, which is the just the cognitive aspect of the left brain, the digital aspect of the left brain. This is connected with the knot of the head tefillin. Like it's known derech prat. Now we can understand when we look at the path of the parts. Derech, when you go through derech, through prat, the parts. When we look at the small basis, shenikra echad. So Zah is also called one. One Aleph is one, Ches is 8, 1 plus 8 is 9, Dalet represents Malchus, that's 10 spheres, so the 10 spheres of Zah. Achtus, the Eser spheres of Atzilus, the 10 spheres of Atzilus, 10 building blocks of creation in the world of Atzilus. The Atzilus is considered a man of action when we look at the bigger picture, because even though Atzilus is like beyond God's thoughts, but that's beyond the cognitive thought. But when we look at the holistic picture of the entire order of creation, Atzilus is the man of action. The chlolos, holistic, right? This is the source, the root, the nourishing root of the cognitive thought of Leah, because Leah is already Bria, it's already God's cognitive thought. Now, it's letters, it's different words which capture the meaning, the machshava, thought of thought. Ach Nikra Dalet Rabasi. Now, why do we have a big Dalet in Echad, like I showed before? Because this is speaking about the speech the way it is in big terms. In other words, the speech the way it is still connected to the thought before actually having cognitive. So in other words, it's an emphasis. It's like bold letters. It's an emphasis. What's the emphasis? It's intimately connected with the intention and the source. That's what it means. The big letter. This mavur l'mayla we explained above. That in thought, there are really two levels. There's the meaning, and then there's just like how am I going to say this? What words am I going to come up with to say it? So there's the higher level and the lower level. Because these are the two levels in thought of thought. In other words, even in thought of thought, the truth is that if you're already thinking about wordsmithing, it's already considered speech. It's already considered a little bit speech and thought. Even if you don't intend to actually say it. And this is what we mean by the big daled. We mean that in thought we mean meaning. We don't mean wordsmithing. The aleph ches tesvirus, because of echad, when you say daled, the big daled of echad is aleph and ches, which 1 plus ches is 8. Tesvirus, that represents already the 9 spheres, the zah of zah, not including expression. Once he expresses himself, it's done. Every single emotion, it's actually going to become into certain words and certain wordsmithing inside layer, that's inside layer in cognitive thought, which is going to capture these emotions, etc. Everything is powered by the thought. It's the expression of the implement. The tfuna is the application brain of the left brain. That is the meaning of meaning. That is what is the big daled. Because the main bold emphasis is not wordsmithing, it's meaning. And therefore there's a halacha that you should really say the daled, or at least mentally lengthen the daled enough time to recognize that everything that we see in the world is really a whole interface of God's speech, which is powered by God's thought, and it's really meaningful. That's what we're trying to say. It's really meaningful, and we don't necessarily. In other words, there is meaning to be found. There is meaning. The world is significant. Every detail of the world is significant. And there's meaning to be found, and that's why we're saying a big daled. And he says, sure is bekenas hamalchus, because the source, the living root of the nourishing root of God's expression, the daled sitri almin, the 4, that's why it's a daled, the 4 sitri sides of the world, meaning directions, should be in the lower unity, because the directions are established in the lower unity. The Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elolam Poed. When in the prayer, you see in the first prayer, when we say Hilo Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, then quietly we say another prayer which represents the lower unity. In other words, when we say Shema Yisrael, we're speaking about the higher unity, and the Echad is the interface, how the cognitive thought, which is actually going to make the reality in the lower unity, is actually directly connected to a dynamic process which involves God, jump spheres, literally jump spheres. That's what, there's no other way to say this. The mother lands so close to the daughter. The Malchus Tmuna, the left brain is connecting with the lower sphere, which is expression, and going to be creating the four directions of the world, and blessed be his name forever and forever. Is what captures that idea of God's cognitive thought in the lower unity. But Gam Hine Muvan Derech flows, and we also understand when we look at the holistic picture, through the holistic picture of Machshava Akduma, from the original thought of the After Tzimtzum, I don't know, the original Kduma, the original thought, Ad the Machshava, no. We mean the original thought after Tzimtzum, yeah, Ad the Malchus Apshuta, the Machshava Apshuta, the After Apshuta, till the thought, the simple thought of Hashem's oneness, Mamish, wow, in God's essence itself. We're not saying Uritzek. This is so fundamental. How often do we actually speak about Atzmos? We mention Atzmos like once in chapter Yud, and we mention it a few times over here. It hasn't happened before because we're actually doing the intent of this Sefer. We're actually now finally doing what was intended. By everything that we learned to now, we are connecting it back to the essence. And we're connecting God's original thought, which glances over the entire creation and all of history and everything that's going to happen, and we're connecting it to the essential, the simple thought in the essence, mamish itself. That original thought is called the hidden of all hiddens. There's no thought can capture God. Cannot capture that thought, the thought of the machshava tuma of Kav, even the thought of Adam Kadmon, even the character, the thought of the character does not really capture, not really, it actually does not capture the hidden of all hidden thoughts of Kav. The Dallas Rabasi, who Kishala Bais Machshavte V'Tzena Pashat. So we're saying that this big Dalet in Shema is on many levels. So when it comes to our personal creation, the big Dalet is the interface between God's digital applicative thinking of Tfuna, the way it interfaces with meaning, but it also exists on a higher level. Dalet Rabasi, this big Dalet, the way he thought about the letters, he did the wordsmithing of the entire world in his essence. So the Dalet exists in his essence also. This big Dalet, let's say, after Tzimtzum comes from this same occurrence, from his expression, from the interface of his expression and his application in his essence. But now, what we said till now is enough for the people that understand. And this is what it's written by Eitz Chaim in the Tree of Life, that the heels of Leah go into the head of Rachel. Rachel is the woman, Leah is the thinking, and it's God's thought. 1 second, I'm going to move this out of the way. Malchus Tfuna Atzmi, 1 second. The Malchus, okay, so we've spoken about this before, that the heels of Leah go into the head of Rachel, because Rachel captures God's actual speaking, and Leah captures God thinking, and it's the interface of both of them which create the world, and they're actually interfacing with each other in the way that the heels of Leah are going to the head of Rachel, which is a riddle, but it's not a riddle, it's a code. The code is that the lowest level of Leah, which Leah is God's cognitive thought, become the Rosh, become the head, the driver for Rachel, God's speech. The lowest level of God's cognitive thought becomes the inspiration for Rachel, which captures God's speech. Chulu, etc. The Maimer Azal, like the rabbis, the saying of the rabbis, Masha Asa Anava, Ekev Lasulia. Sulia is a sole of a shoe. Now, let's listen carefully. Masha Asa Anava, humility is a heel, a heel to the sole of a shoe. Asayira Atara Larosha became fear and a head and a crown to her head. What is humility? Well, obviously a shoe is humble because everybody steps on it. So the recognition, humility is the recognition that other people, I'm no better than anybody else. And even if I'm more proficient in something than other people, that's because I was given the opportunity, and I didn't create that opportunity for myself. So there's no real objective reason why I am better than anybody else. And and the most humble person is Moshe Rabbeinu, and there'll never be another person that's as humble as Moshe Rabbeinu. So we're only just wannabes. We're just wannabes to this idea. We're in training, you know. It's a work in progress. So that's humility. That becomes the crown of fear. If a person has humility, they don't think that anybody, that actually helps a person to be God-fearing. And that becomes the driver of God-fearingness. Now, what's humble? Speech is humble because speech has nothing on its own without thought that powers the speech. So speech is humble. Dibur explains this riddle. Dibur shema machshava shenesis machshava shebedibur. The expression in thought, in other words, the wordsmithing in thought becomes the thought that powers the actual articulation. The wordsmithing, dibur shemachshava, speech in thought, the wordsmithing in thought becomes the machshava, the thought, shebedibur, in articulation. Shizehu ekavanava. So the speech inside thought is actually humble because it has nothing for itself. That's the heel of humility. Because thought is hidden and it's intangible, and speech is what everybody sees, right? It's revealed, and it's something concrete. And this humility of thought, this thought, which is humble and it's not seen and it's intangible, it becomes the actual crown, and keser, a keser, lerachel, becomes the crown to rachel, which is actually speech. Because the power and the root, the rosh, the dibur, and the head of speech, is actually the wordsmithing of different letters in the thought. If the wordsmithing of the thought stops, then speech will also stop. So when a person spaced out, they're not thinking, they're not speaking either. Like it's not. And this is which we're explaining the ekev, the heel of humility, which is the thought, which is humble, and the lowest level of the thought, which is the speech of the thought, which is humble. Yiras Hashem, that is the driver of actual speech of God-fearingness, etc. The commission as it's written in another place. So we've worked really hard to try to capture the meaning of this chapter, this very significant chapter that hopefully opens your eyes in what's really going on, the dynamic process that is going on in the essence of God, till our physical world, and how it is significant, and how everything, it is our obligation and duty as part of the mitzvah of the oneness of God to connect everything that happens with our life to the original essence, how the big Dalet is really inside the essence, how this dynamic process is actually happening in the essence of God, although perhaps in an inverted order. And that's it for this week. And next week we're going to continue, and we're going to really start to connect everything that we've been learning about. Eventually we're going to connect it up with what we actually see in our world.
Thank you, Rabbi Chirik.
You're welcome.